In February 2026, Netflix released Reality Check, Inside America's Next Top Model. Within days, it became the most watched show on the platform. That makes sense because America's Next Top Model shaped a generation of women, and people have been waiting years for someone to finally ask the hard questions out loud. The documentary promised exactly that. Tyra Banks sat down on camera for the first time to address the controversies. The original judges were there. Former contestants were there. It was supposed to be the reckoning. It was not the reckoning. What it was is something more complicated and in some ways more revealing than an actual apology tour would have been. The way people avoid accountability tells you just as much as accountability itself would. So let's go through it. What the documentary got right, what it deliberately avoided, and what it accidentally exposed about Tyra Banks without ever meaning to. We will start with the things Reality Check actually did well, because there are some, and they deserve to be acknowledged. The most important story in this documentary is one that most people who watched the original show did not fully understand at the time. In Cycle 2, contestant Shandi Sullivan traveled to Milan with the rest of the cast. Production introduced the models to a group of Italian men, their Vespa drivers, for a go-see challenge that day. That same evening, those men were invited back to the model's apartment for dinner. Alcohol was flowing. Everyone ended up in the hot tub together. And what happened next was filmed in its entirety. Shandi described it in the documentary. She said she had drunk 2 bottles of wine and was heavily intoxicated. She said everything after a certain point was a blur. She said she remembers him being on top of her. She said she was blacked out, that she did not feel it happening, she just knew that it was. She said no one did anything to stop it, and she said every moment of it was on camera. When it aired in 2004, the show called the episode "The Girl Who Cheated." That was the storyline. That is the edit that millions of people watched. A young woman was sexually assaulted while unconscious, with a production crew present, and it was packaged as a dramatic twist about infidelity. But it gets worse. When Shandi later appeared as a guest on the Tyra Banks show, she told producers beforehand that she had never watched what happened to her and did not want to see it. She made that clear. And then Tyra played the footage anyway, right there in front of a live studio audience. When Shandi looked away, Tyra pointed it out on camera and said she noticed she was not watching. Shandi's response in the documentary was that she had literally told them, behind the scenes, she had never seen it and did not want to see it. You did not respect that at all. That behavior does not stop. Her behavior does not change. When the documentary asked producer Ken Mock whether production should have intervened in Milan, his answer was that they treated the show like a documentary and that the cameras were rolling 24 hours a day. He later clarified that significant edits were made before it aired. But the camera kept rolling. Nobody pulled her out of the situation, and for over 20 years, the public version of that story was that Shandi cheated on her boyfriend. The documentary also covers what happened to Keenyah Hill in Cycle 4. During a photo shoot, a male model behaved inappropriately toward her. She spoke up on set. She said clearly that she was uncomfortable. The producers did nothing. At the next judging panel, Tyra told her she should have used her feminine wiles and handled it in a fun way. Keenyah said in the documentary that she believed they wanted to see her crumble and that she was glad they did not get the reaction they were hoping for. Tyra said that none of them knew better at the time and that it would be handled differently today. She addressed Keenyah directly and said she was sorry. That apology landed better than most of Tyra's moments in this documentary, but it still came with a caveat. None of us knew. That framing matters because it shifts the wrongdoing away from individual choices and into the vague category of a different time, which is exactly the kind of language that sounds like accountability without actually being it. If you are not already subscribed, now is a good time. This is the kind of content we cover here, the full story, no gloss. Hit subscribe and drop a comment below telling me what you thought when you watched this documentary. Did it feel like enough to you? I genuinely want to know. Now let's get into where reality check starts to fall apart. Tyra Banks is in this documentary. She agreed to participate, and the filmmakers confirmed she had no editorial control over the final cut. That sounds promising, but watching her on screen tells a very different story, not because of what she says, but because of what she consistently refuses to say. When the documentary turns to Shandi Sullivan's story, Tyra is asked about it directly. Her response is almost word for word. That is a little difficult for me to talk about because production is not my territory. She was the creator, the host, and the executive producer of the show. Production was entirely her territory. But the moment a question gets too specific, too close to real culpability, she redirects. That is not my area. I should have a conversation with that person privately. Hindsight is 20/20. That phrase comes up more than once. When she talks about pressuring Danny Evans to close her gap, she says a lot of the things that are 20/20 for me happened in front of the world. When she talks about the Tiffany Richardson screaming incident, she says she went too far, but then immediately contextualizes it, framing it as all the frustration of being a Black woman in a world that told her she was not good enough, projected onto one girl at one elimination. She admits the behavior, but she never quite sits in it. There is always a reason. There is always a next sentence. The documentary also features executive producer Ken Mock, and his contributions are unintentionally some of the most revealing moments in the entire series. In archival footage from when the show was still airing, Mock is heard saying that the biggest disaster is always the best thing. He described girls with 104-degree fevers, girls throwing up, girls needing IV drips, and said that was the best news he could ever have. He said this while the show was running. He said it proudly. In the documentary, nobody pushes back on it. It is presented, and then the conversation moves on. He also explained that many of the girls who were cast came from difficult family backgrounds, without strong parental support, without people at home validating them. He said this without seeming to realize what he was describing, the deliberate targeting of vulnerable young women who were less likely to push back, less likely to have someone fighting their corner, and more susceptible to seeking approval from the very people exploiting them. He did not say it was a strategy, but he described a strategy. Now let's talk about the judges, because their stories are where the documentary accidentally reveals the most about who Tyra Banks actually is. Jay Manuel was Tyra's makeup artist before the show existed.
He was there from the very beginning. He was the creative director for years. And when he tried to leave the show gracefully after cycle 8, sending what he described as a short, warm email expressing gratitude, Tyra responded with 3 words. I am disappointed. That was it. No conversation, no acknowledgement of his years of work. After that, according to Jay, they were no longer allowed to speak off camera. He described it as psychological torture. He said he felt broken. When a producer asks Tyra directly about what happened between her and Jay in the documentary, she declines to answer on camera. She says she should call Jay. Meanwhile, Jay has spoken about it openly and at length, both in the documentary and in interviews afterward. He said, in Tyra's world, you do not leave Tyra, Tyra leaves you. And he said that if he never spoke to her again in this lifetime, he is okay with that.
Then there is Miss J. Alexander. Miss J knew Tyra when she was 17 years old. He was one of the first people she brought onto the show. On December 27th, 2022, he suffered a stroke. He spent 5 weeks in a coma. He lost the ability to walk and to speak. The man who built his entire career teaching models how to move their bodies could no longer move his own. Jay Manuel visited him in the hospital. Nigel Barker visited him. Tyra Banks did not. In the documentary, when the producers ask Miss J whether Tyra ever came, he answers plainly, "No, not yet. She never came to visit." While the cameras were still rolling, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Tyra saying she wanted to see him. The timing of that text, arriving exactly as the documentary captured his answer about her absence, is something the audience is left to sit with. After the documentary aired, Miss J spoke about it publicly. He confirmed Tyra still had not visited. He confirmed she had reached out when it first happened, saying she was in Los Angeles and never made it over. When asked if that made him feel some type of way, he said yes. Nigel Barker, sitting beside him, put it simply, if you have a friend or someone you care about, you just go the extra mile, do you not? This is the pattern that runs through everything Tyra does in and around this documentary. The acknowledgement comes just late enough to feel like damage control. The apology arrives with an explanation attached. The difficult question gets deferred to a private conversation that never happens on screen. And when she is not redirecting, she talks about the show's legacy, about how hard she fought to get diversity onto television, all of which may be true, and none of which is what anyone is actually asking her about. There is one more thing that needs to be said, and it is the thing that reframes everything else in this documentary. Lisa D'Amato is not in Reality Check. Tiffany Richardson is not in it either. These are two of the most significant figures in the show's history when it comes to how contestants were actually treated, and they are both absent. Lisa appeared instead on the E-Series Dirty Rotten Scandals, which aired in March of 2026, and she was explicit about why. Lisa said she did not trust anything Tyra touched. She called Reality Check sugar-coated, and she said it was so much worse for many of them. And she said the full story was still not being told. The filmmakers of Reality Check have stated that Tyra participated without editorial control. That may be technically true, but participation itself is a form of control. When the person who caused the harm also shapes who gets invited to speak about it, the narrative is managed, whether the editing suite is involved or not. The women who would have been hardest to sit across from simply are not there. At the very end of the documentary, Tyra looks into the camera and says, "I feel like my work is not done. You have no idea what we have planned for Cycle 25th. She said this at the end of an accountability documentary. As if everything that had just been laid out, the sexual assault filmed and repackaged as entertainment, the girls deliberately cast because they had no one at home to protect them, and the man who taught her how to walk, whom she still has not gone to see, was just the warm-up act. That is the real Reality Check, not the documentary. The documentary is the version of events Tyra was comfortable enough to sit next to. The actual reckoning is still happening outside of it, in the words of women who were not given a seat at the table, in the interviews J. Manuel keeps giving, and in the fact that Miss J is still waiting for a visit that has not come. America's Next Top Model ran for 24 cycles and shaped how an entire generation of women thought about beauty, ambition, and their own worth. The women who gave that show everything it had deserve more than hindsight being 2020. They deserve someone looking them in the eye and meaning it. That still has not happened. If this video gave you something to think about, leave a comment. I read every single one. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of thing we cover. Hit that button so you do not miss what is coming next.